If you've been on social media, you've probably seen videos or pictures of bison attacking tourists in national parks. Online articles will tell you it's pretty rare, but with the plethora of pictures and videos and stories online, that kind of says otherwise. While many people getting outside, these attacks seem to be becoming more frequent, and not just for bison, but for all animals. Antelope Island State Park in Salt Lake City, Utah, saw two gorings in 2019. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. My name is Elise, and I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening today, and thank you so much for being a member on Patreon. And if you're not a member on Patreon, like if you're listening to this in the regular feed, you should come join us. I post bonus episodes, and this summer I'm going to be better about posting bonus content. So I'd love to have you over here. So I want to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land now known as Antelope Island State Park sits within the ancestral homelands of Indigenous peoples who have lived and cared for the Great Salt Lake for thousands of years. This includes the Shoshone, Goshute, Ute, and Paiute peoples, whose histories, trade routes, and cultural traditions are deeply tied to this island and its surrounding waters. We honor their enduring connection to this landscape and recognize their continued presence, sovereignty, and stewardship of the Great Salt Lake region. Okay, boy, I have so much to say in this episode. And because this is a Patreon episode, I'm going to be a little more informal. So, Antelope Island, I have been to many, many times because I live in the area. Not in the area of Antelope Island, but I live in the Great Salt Lake Valley. And this is a popular place for people to go on scenic drives and hike. And I hiked here just last weekend, actually. So I usually only hike here in the winter because of the bugs. Some of the negative reviews we're going to read are about the bugs, and the bugs are bad. The bugs are bad. They have these things called brine flies, and they are like it sounds like a freaking what is that thing called? A drone. I mean, it sound like these bugs, you can audibly hear the swarms and they will just attack you. So I like this area. I do not go in the summer. I will only go in the winter. And in fact, what we're going to talk about today, I have done this exact trail multiple times. So I have a lot of things to say about it. But first, let's start with the negative reviews. Someone said, horrible. We were swarmed by millions of sandflies. There were dead seagulls lining the shore of the beach access area and lots of spiders. And then they, in parentheses, Western black widows and orb weavers blocked the lakeside loop trail. So spiders were blocking it. We didn't see any bison, and the only wildlife seen was a singular antelope barely within view. Also, the island has a pathetic excuse of a beach. Do people like this place? Yes, people do. But you have to go at the right time. Someone also said 1 star for the bison, 0 for the park, 100 degrees and boring. Not even any water in the lake. If you want a nice walk, go elsewhere. All I can see is pollution. Someone else, this one cracked me up. This this review. They said nothing in all caps but bug. And, like, it's like nothing period but bug, so I thought that was funny. Someone else said, I have never noped out of a place so fast. The bugs are real. There are literal smoke clouds, in all caps, of them, and they swarm you everywhere you go. Hiking trails were not fun. At a certain point, I decided I didn't want to get out of my car in fear of getting swarmed. Very quickly took pics of a few bison and the lake and booked out of there faster than a cheetah on steroids. I have also had that very same experience when I first moved to Utah. I didn't know that this was like such a buggy place in the summer, and I went and it was terrible. It was also freaking hot. So I suggest if you want to visit Antelope Island State Park, go in the winter. Still is beautiful, but less bugs. Someone else said, didn't see one antelope, not advertised as promised. So I just love those because I actually know this place very well, and, I kind of agree with some of those reviews because the bugs are so bad, and actually at the entrance, there are a ton of signs that says, like, "You will not be refunded for bugs." So I think that's kind of funny. Antelope Island has an area of 42 square miles or 109 square kilometers, and it's actually the largest of 10 islands located within the Great Salt Lake in Utah. The island lies on the southeastern portion of the lake near Salt Lake City and becomes a peninsula when the lake is at extremely low levels. It is protected as Antelope Island State Park. So let's talk about this history a little bit. I had actually never looked up this history of the state park before, even though I've been many times. And I think most of us are like that. Like, we don't always Google something or the history before we go there. And so I was very pleased to read about some of this because I think it's really interesting. So, the first non natives to visit the island were John C. Fremont and Kit Carson during the exploration of the Great Salt Lake in 1845. They rode on horseback over salt from the thickness of a wafer to 12 inches. These are all in quotes. And they were informed by the Indians that there was an abundance of fresh water on it and plenty of antelope. It is said that they shot pronghorn antelope on the island, and in gratitude for the meat, they named it Antelope Island. I always like reading about Kit Carson because I think I don't know if like they teach about the American frontiersmen anymore in schools, but when I was in college, I actually worked on Philmont Scout Ranch, and I got to go to Rayado, which is like Kit Carson's home, and I went inside Kit Carson's home. Well, what once was his home. And I don't know, I like the name Kit, so I think it's cool. Okay, so Antelope Island has a large population of American bison, bighorn sheep, porcupine, badger, coyote, bobcat, mule deer, and millions of waterfowl. Yes, you will see seagulls. The bison were introduced to the island in 1893, and the Antelope Island bison herd has proven to be a valuable genetic pool for bison breeding and conservation purposes. The bison do very well here because much of the island is covered by dry native grassland. And here's a geology tidbit for you this morning. The Precambrian deposits of rock on Antelope Island are some of the oldest rocks in the United States. They are even older than the Cambrian rocks at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. So, rocks on Antelope Island are older than ones at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. So, very old. There's a lot of cool geology, and it's just a really cool place, honestly. And if you've never been and you live in Utah, I highly recommend it. Like most of the places we talk about on this show, people wanted Antelope Island to become a national park. Um, but unfortunately, that movement never came to fruition. When the Utah State Park system was created, there were many proposals to turn Antelope Island into Antelope Island State Park. And the proposal I cannot talk, sorry, gradually gathered public support, but Antelope Island was privately owned at this time. Now, originally, Antelope Island was used as a ranch for cattle and sheep, starting from the earliest days of arrival of the Mormon pioneers into the Salt Lake Valley. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church, they actually controlled the ranch on the island from 1848 until 1870. The island was actually purchased in 1870 by John Dooley Sr., and he established the Island Improvement Company, which was his company, which managed the island and ranches from 1884 until 1981. Now, this man is who is responsible for the introduction of bison and the foundation of the Antelope Island bison herd. He initially brought 12 bison to the island, four bulls, four cows, and four calves, and they were transported by boat on February 15th, 1893. At the time, there were fewer than 1,000 head of bison in all of North America. Historians speculate that Dooley introduced the herd to the island for commercial purposes, with the idea of establishing a rare opportunity for hunters to take the nearly extinct American bison. The 12 bison became the foundation of the Antelope Island bison herd that numbers between 500 and 700 animals, making it one of the largest and oldest publicly owned American bison herds in the United States. A. H. Leonard purchased the herd of bison from the Dooley family in 1926. Now, Leonard intended to sell the herd to zoos, but he found it impossible to get the bison off of the island due to the water level and the drafts and sizes of boats that were available to him. The bison were just too big. At this point, he offered to sell the herd to the federal government if a national park were to be established on the island. Time magazine cites congressional apathy as being the reason the island and bison herd were not protected. Senator Frank E. Moss of Utah asked the National Park Service to consider the Great Salt Lake for inclusion in the national park system in 1959. The study had a high praise for Antelope Island as a potential national park, but found, quote, little else worthwhile about the Great Salt Lake, which is kind of funny. The National Park Service was concerned with a lack of planning by the state of Utah and the fact that the lake was used as a dumping site for municipal and industrial waste. The National Park Service was impressed by the scenic and recreational possibilities of the northern end of Antelope Island, describing it as, quote, the most impressive sight of the lake. Now, I have been here many times. It is just unreal how still the Great Salt Lake is because there are no fish that live in it because it's too salty. They have like little brine shrimp, but I mean they're tiny, but really it's just still super flat water if it's not windy, and it looks just like the sky. It looks like a mirror. It's basically a giant mirror in a lake. So the state of Utah purchased the northern part of the island in 1969 and acquired the remainder in 1981 when the state purchased the historical Fielding Gart Ranch. Subsequently, the cattle and sheep were all removed and Antelope Island State Park was established in 1969. They first called it Great Salt Lake State Park. At the time, the facilities at the park were very minimal. There were temporary shower facilities, and those were available for long weekends over Memorial Day of 1969. They also had boating facilities on a limited basis, and it basically has this very long history as being a ranch, and then it's a state park. I just think it's a really cool place. I would love to explore it more, but it's pretty big and it's really beautiful. And in fact, the last time that I was there, which was last weekend, I was hiking and I saw a coyote. I was hiking on a trail and I see this like dog figure high up on some rocks just watching me. And it was a coyote and he watched me for quite a while. I also saw some deer that were really close. They actually scared the crap out of me because they made a sound and I couldn't see them over the sagebrush. I saw bison, and I actually had to go off of the trail at it added zero point 0.3 miles to my hike so that I could safely be at a safe distance from the bison because they are huge and scary and they will attack you. So, Antelope Island State Park was established in 1981 as a part of the Utah State Park System. It had 280 visitors in 2010. I couldn't find more recent numbers, but at the time, it was the fifth most visited state park in Utah. Now, like I said, it's big. It's actually 28,022 acres and is 15 miles or 24 kilometers long and 4.5 miles or 7.2 kilometers wide at its widest point. The island is in the midst of the Great Basin between the Wasatch and Sierra Nevada mountain ranges. The highest point on the island is Frary Peak at 6,589 feet or 2,008 meters above sea level. This state park is open year round for recreation and it features a marina, beach, campground, and hiking trails. And yes, you can swim in the Great Salt Lake. There is a swimming area. Have I ever swam in the Great Salt Lake? No, but I've just hiked around it and it's pretty. The rest of the park is largely undeveloped. It is pretty wild. There's a restaurant located near the Bridger Bay beach access, but other than that, that's it. And I think currently a really nice visitor center is being built. I saw construction, but I don't ever go up to the structures because I want to be outside and not inside. So, a few old roads cross the island, and so do some of the hiking trails. There are remnants of old mining claims, and the Fielding Gar Ranch are open to park visitors. There's this historic boat display in the marina, so it's a really cool area. Antelope Island is known for its scenery, especially in the northwest quadrant of the island at Buffalo Point and White Rock Bay. And when you're on the island, you have 360 views of the Great Salt Lake. And actually, you can see so far, it's like the lake blends in with the sky, and you can't tell the difference between the sky and the lake. And then you also have the mountain ranges that surround it, and it's so pretty, especially in the winter when the mountains are snow capped. It's just really, oops, I hit my microphone. It's just really beautiful and picturesque. So let's talk about the animals on Antelope Island. Obviously, it's most famous for its herd of bison, and right now there's about 700 bison. So, yes, when you're driving on this island, it is kind of similar to driving through Yellowstone. In fact, I would suggest going to Antelope Island State Park if you want to see bison. I don't know, I just think the experience is cooler because there are less people. So whenever there are bison on the road or close to the road, you can still stay in your car and see them from up close, but there's not like a crap ton of people. There's not usually stupid people walking up to the bison and doing stupid things. So most people that go there are smart. I say most. And there's less people, and you can still see these really magnificent creatures up close without all of the human crowds. So there are other animals, like I said, like jackrabbits, pronghorns, mule deer, coyotes, and like small rodents and stuff. There are also bighorn sheep and lots of birds, but there aren't a lot of predators except like coyotes or foxes. There are no cougars, and the bison is the biggest animal on the island. So it's a pretty, I would say, safe place to hike. There are no bears, there are no mountain lions, or moose, but there are bison, and they do attack. And that is why we are here today. I want to describe to you something that is almost incomprehensible. Pre COVID, it's September 2019. People are still using dating apps, and no one is social distancing yet. And life's great, right? Before COVID, life is great. 20 I don't know, I just can't even fathom, like, September 2019, I was in graduate school and thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about my future and it's gonna be great." And then 2020 happened. And as you guys all know how that went. But that aside, it is before COVID. People are still meeting up on dating sites and getting together. And this was true for 22-year-old Kaylee Davis, and she saw a cute guy on Bumble. His name was Kyler, and his profile said that he liked to trail run and loved the outdoors. So automatically, these things were appealing to Kaylee. But the one thing on his profile that stood out to her is that he had survived a bison attack. And yes, if I were a guy and I had survived a bison attack, you can bet your butt that I would be putting on that on my dating profile. I mean, it's pretty badass and it's an attention grabber, which if you guys have been on dating apps, you'll know that you have to have something that sets you apart. And this was Kyler's one thing. He had in fact survived a bison attack earlier that year. Now, Kaylee really loved to explore Utah, so she thought that she should reach out to him, and she did. And on Bumble, you have to message first if you're the girl. So she tried to be cheeky, well, like kind of a icebreaker, and she asked him if he did anything to antagonize the bison. And Kyler said no, he hadn't, and that he'd tell her the story if they ever met up. And that's kind of genius for him. Kaylee was intrigued, and so she suggested they meet up after they chatted for like a day or two. And their first date, they decided that they were gonna do a picnic and paddle boarding at a local reservoir. And that honestly, that's like my ideal summer day. Now, Kyler said in an interview, "We just had a really nice day doing that. When we were tired with that, we ended up driving to a ski resort nearby and hiking up to the peak. We watched the sunset on our way back down and then went and got Chinese food." And I don't know about you guys, but I remember when I was trying to internet date, that day seems like the perfect first date slash day ever. That seems so relaxing and fun, to me at least. So after Chinese food, they decided that, like, they should say goodbye and that their day was over. But it was hard for them to say goodbye to each other because they were enjoying each other's like time and presence so much. So part of Kaylee and Kyler's date did include talk about the bison incident. And Kaylee got to learn all about how important Antelope Island was to Kyler and how hard it was for him after the attack. Basically, Kyler grew up going to Antelope Island because it's basically his backyard. And in fact, his grandfather raised the flag on the day it was dedicated as a state park more than 50 years ago. So he frequently went and hiked and spent time there with his family. And on an episode of This Is Love podcast, this is what Kyler had to say. Quote, "My parents and I had gone out there to hike up to Frary Peak Trail, which is a trail that has become my favorite. It was around my 150th time going up to this peak. It's the lack of trees that make it really peaceful to me because you can see forever. You're just surrounded by lake and flowers. And what I usually do when I go with my family is I'll run laps up and down while they work their way up to the trail because we've all been up there a bunch of times. It's not like we're going to get lost or anything weird like that. So I'm on my first lap running up the trail. I see three people sitting on some rocks above this little saddle where the trail comes up. I walk up to them for a minute. I've just seen the people sit up there. So, I don't think it's too unusual. And I kept running. I come over the crest of that hill and it's pretty steep. The other side are just drop offs and a big rocky cliff sort of thing. And I'm looking at two adult bison just standing there in this bowl. And I looked over and I remember saying, "Oops," out loud because I knew I was too close. These were full grown adult bison that get up to 2,000 pounds. They can be miles away and look like a car because they're so massive. I turned around and made it a few steps away. I looked back over my shoulder and one of them was charging me. It didn't take very long to catch me. I only made it a few more steps of running before it was on top of me. And I remember looking right into its face before I got hit. I got these images burned into my head. I'm not entirely sure how far I flew. I closed my eyes while I was spinning. I can only describe it based off of how I felt because I couldn't really see anything. It just felt like a whirlwind, and I was getting smashed inside of it. I yelled up to those other people who saw it happen, just yelling, "Help, help." I heard them shushing me. I looked over because he was just using his peripheral vision because my head was cracked and there was blood running down my head mixing with the sweat that was running into my eyes. So I'm side glancing after I hear them shushing, and the bison is still hanging out right there next to me. It was watching for any threat, and it was ready to finish me off, basically. Now, it took a while for this bison to actually walk away from Kyler. It kept standing nearby. So the people that saw him and were hearing him call for help, they couldn't come down and help him until it had moved away. So he basically just said like I need a helicopter right now. And he thinks that these people had called 911 before they even made their way down to Kyler. So a helicopter lands, they get Kyler onto a stretcher and they take off in the helicopter. He had to have a neck brace and he just remembers, looking over and he remembers being disappointed. He says that he couldn't turn his head and look down at how beautiful it was, that one chance that he got to fly over it in a helicopter. And I just think that speaks to his love of the outdoors because even though he just got attacked by a bison and seriously injured, still is so mesmerized by Antelope Island. He just all he wants to do is look down and see it from above, and he was kind of sad that he couldn't. Kyler's parents were far behind him on the trail because he'd been running and they'd been walking. His parents saw the helicopter, but they really had no idea what had happened. And when they realized that the person in the helicopter was likely their son, they turned around and headed back to the base of the trail as quickly as they could. When they got to the hospital, they learned that Kyler had a fractured rib, a collapsed lung, and several large wounds, and Kyler had to have surgery. Now, he did make a recovery after receiving medical intervention, but the attack did more than just physically impact him. It took a mental toll on Kyler as well. Kyler felt like he had lost his home, and he decided that he couldn't just not go back to Antelope Island. He said later that year, on June 19th, he biked to the edge of the island, and that this was only a few weeks after his incident. He didn't go on the island because he was just on the causeway, but he biked to the edge and stopped. And it wasn't until September when he first hiked on the island again, and that was when he went on a date with Kaylee. So Kaylee came to learn about how much Antelope Island meant to Kyler, and she wanted to be a good friend and encouraging, and she wanted to help him overcome that fear and get him back to where he loved. Kaylee also grew up going to Antelope Island and loved it as much as Kyler had. She and Kyler had actually gone out a few more times and she liked him, but she hadn't heard from him in a little while and she was just kind of waiting on him to reach back out. She told herself she'd give him until the end of the week, and if he didn't call, that she'd move on. And I know I did this when I was internet dating, and it's just something you have to do to protect yourself so that you're not left waiting and waiting and waiting. And then on September 27th, she was on her way up to Antelope Island to go trail running. Kyler called Kaylee to see if she wanted to go watch the sunset. And she said, hey, like, yeah, but I'm already on my way to Antelope Island. So she just decided to wait for him and met him at his house so that they could go together. But she still wanted to do a run. She just didn't want to go sit and watch the sunset. She wanted to get active and kind of end the day on a really good note of a nice run. So Kyler said, like, you can go ahead and run, we can designate a spot to meet or turn around at, and we'll watch the sunset there together, and it'll be fine. So, it was a win-win situation. Kyler wanted to watch the sunset with her. She wanted to go for a trail run. This is how they would make it happen together on Antelope Island. Kyler had brought his dogs, so he was getting them out of the truck, and Kaylee decided to start her run. And so she ran up a hill while Kyler got his dogs out of his truck. And Kaylee reached about a mile and a fourth, and that's when she sees the bison. And she's running, and she knows Kyler's story. So she got scared and she ran past the bison and she got off trail just so she could be further from it. She said the bison didn't even notice her. He was eating grass and she thought everything was fine. And then she started thinking like, does Kyler really want to pass the bison after his very traumatic incident? He also had dogs with him, and dogs will bark at bison. So, just a safety concern. So, Kaylee decided to turn around and go back to him and say, "Hey, let's not do this trail anymore," because she was concerned. And right as she turned back, there were four scout kids on their mountain bikes that passed her on the trail. She waved at them and said hi, and then the bison starts charging her. She didn't know what to do in the moment. I mean, I can't even imagine what goes through your mind, but the only thing that Kaylee thought to do was to run away. So that's what Kaylee did. She ran as fast as she could. Now, she obviously wanted to check and make sure she was able to run fast enough. So the first time she looked over her shoulder, she heard the bison trampling and everything, and she was just thinking, oh my gosh, he's getting close. She looks over a second time, and he was like 10 yards behind her. And then the third time she looked over, he was right behind her. The only thing she was thinking was basically, how do I get out of this? And the next thing she knew, she was going up in the air and she was attacked. She says she thinks she was like 15 feet up in the air. And while she was up there, she was thinking she's gonna land on her head, and she was like, "This is it." And basically, like, "I'm gonna die." And she says she doesn't remember what really much of what happened, but the next thing that she knows, she's on the ground. She feel that her ankle's warm, so she knew it was injured. She said she didn't feel pain, she just felt the warmth. So she's hurt. She doesn't and it's still in her mind that like, oh my gosh, I need to tell Kyler to not come on this trail with his dogs because she was worried about him. So as Kaylee's laying on the ground, she's hurt. The bison is still right there. He's smelling her. He's like kind of digging, you know how like bulls do that. And she's thinking he's going to trample me or worse. And the only thing that she could think of was like that Kyler had talked about him moving and then he got trampled. So she knew that she had to stay extremely still, or there was a possibility this bison might want to attack again. Kaylee laid on the ground for 2 to 3 minutes, and there was a man that called out to her, and he said, "Be still and don't move." Someone was already calling 911. She could hear this person calling 911. And honestly, it's really lucky that multiple people were in both situations on both days that these attacks happened, because if you were out there alone, it's pretty desolate, and who knows if anyone would find you and how long it would take, honestly. So Kyler doesn't know what has happened because he was busy wrangling his dogs. And he's on the trail, and some kids run up to him asking if he was Kyler. And so he immediately knew something was wrong. He handed his dogs over to those kids, I think they were Boy Scouts, so that he can go and see what had happened. He makes it over the hill, and the bison is hanging out, just standing there, like 30 feet from Kaylee. And the scout's leader is nearby watching. He's just kind of nearby, like waiting to see what happens. And Kyler came in, he's got his bear spray, he has it ready, and he hands his bear spray over to the scout leader, and he tells this guy to stand and watch. And if the bison turns around to spray it because it was just basically hanging out there. Kaylee was laying in the gravel and bleeding from her ankle. She had a really bad wound on the back of her thigh. Someone was able to make a tourniquet to help stop the bleeding. And after an hour, the rescue helicopter arrived and took Kaylee to the hospital. Kaylee had to have emergency surgery and stayed in the hospital for 3 days. I'm not sure if I said this earlier in the episode, but if a bison attacks you, it's called getting gored. And it sounds so scary because it is. So I just want to rewind and just point out that Kyler had gotten attacked by a bison on Antelope Island State Park earlier in 2019. And then, like 3 months later, he takes a date out there and she gets attacked by a bison. That is crazy. That's like, lightning doesn't whatever the lightning thing is, lightning striking twice. I can't think of it. That is exactly what happened in this situation. And I think I know which trail they were on because every single time I've been on this trail, there are always a ton of bison. I'm pretty sure they were on the lakeside loop, because that always has bison on it. And in fact, last week when I was hiking there, I had to make a pretty long detour through a campground to get away from bison. And there were bison on both sides of the trail. There was a large group, and most of them were laying down. And then on the other side was one singular bison. I didn't take my chance. And if you guys don't know, the rule of thumb, it's actually a rule of thumb, is like if you can put your thumb up and, squint, and if the bison or animal is you can't see them behind your thumb, that means you're at a safe distance. If you can put your thumb up and still see the animal, you know, that means you're too close. And when I'm on Antelope Island, I do not take any chances because I do not want to be attacked. However, every time I do the lakeside loop, I always see trail runners. And that's exactly what both Kyler and Kaylee were doing when they got attacked. Part of that is because you can't see what's over a hill if you're running. You could startle an animal and you're moving at a fast pace. And some animals, I'm not saying bison do, have this prey drive and they'll just attack you. So, yes, the how does that even happen? Like, how did that even happen a second time to someone? I don't know, it's just a crazy thing to think about. So, literally, this guy was attacked by a bison, met a girl on Bumble, talked about the story. They went on a date to Antelope Island, and then she was attacked. It is just insane. So, yes. So, in December 2019, Kyler decided to face his fears and go for a run. And he went for a run on Antelope Island State Park. And let me tell you, Kyler is way more brave than I am. And honestly, these two people, Kyler and Kaylee, are total badasses because I don't know if I would have enough mental strength to go back to a place where I had been attacked by an animal and had pretty serious injuries. Oh, and by the way, Kaylee was fine after surgery and a hospital stay. She recovered. Now, on his run, he said that every piece of brush looked like a bison. Every bird that flew over his head scared him. And he just felt like on pins and needles and like very scared the whole time. And so when he was coming up over a hill, he would peek over slowly because it was surreal to him to walk in there and stare where he had landed and just kind of be having these flashbacks the whole time of thinking, oh my god, that's where I was laying after this bison attacked me. He says he remembered, starting to come back down the hill with the sun on his face and that he started tearing up because it felt so good for him to be back. He says it's hard to describe how much he loves being out there. And he also said, "It feels way better going back than staying away. Even though I'm terrified of them, it still feels better." Now, like I said earlier, reports of bison gorings are rare, but just in that same year in 2019, a 9-year-old Florida girl was injured by a bison at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming in July. And then later on in July, a 17-year-old Colorado boy was gored at Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. Now, like, I don't know what the instances were. I'm sure you've seen the videos of people getting attacked. And most of the time, these people are way too close to the bison. They weren't on a trail run. They were, FAFO, basically. They were being stupid and getting too close to these wild animals that can attack you. Now, bison do not eat people, which is good, but they still can do really bad damage to you. Like Kyler had a collapsed lung. That's a serious, serious injury. So I'm saying that Kyler and Kaylee, they did nothing to provoke these animals, but the people in like Yellowstone usually do. They usually get way too close or they try to pet them or whatever. And I don't know, I can't remember what year it was, but there was this lady who had got too close to a bison and it attacked her, but her pants came off, and the pants were stuck to the bison's horn, and I think that is hilarious. The lady was okay, but I think that's so funny because imagine this bison walking around Yellowstone with a pair of blue jeans attached to its horn. You can Google pictures of that. It is so funny. I mean, it's good that she's okay, but it's funny about the bison. Then, a year later in 2020, another bison attack happened on Antelope Island, and the man did not survive. Now, this I know for sure happened on the trail that I just hiked and have hiked several times. It's called the Lakeside Loop and it's 5 miles and it's a really pretty and beautiful trail. There are always a lot of bison on this trail. So basically, a 55-year-old man was attacked while hiking on the Lakeside Loop. Two women heard him calling for help and they called 911. He was flighted to the hospital, but he died later that night. And it's really, really unfortunate. But when investigators were doing their jobs and looking at what happened, like, was he attacked by a bison? Was he attacked by a person? At the time, they didn't know for sure, but because of the evidence at the scene and his injuries, they deemed that yes, he was attacked by a bison. Now, nearby where he was found, there were AirPods that were in the area. So they think what probably happened was that he had his AirPods in and was, doing a trail run, spooked a bison, and then attacked him. And I mean, nobody knows exactly how long he was out there unable to get help because it's a 5-mile loop and it's not like a super, super popular trail. So I'm very glad that these women were able to call 911 and get him help, even though he ended up passing away from this attack. So this is just a reminder that even though there are animals that do not eat meat, bison and deer and rams, they do not eat meat, but they can still be extremely dangerous to us humans. All wild animals should be given respect and space when you are out recreating outside because what it looks like a fun day and an easy day outside could turn into a nightmare, and you just don't ever know when and if that will happen. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. You can also join us on Patreon for early and ad free content. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.